Welcome back to American Football News. This is the NFL edition, playoff edition, Division Round. Okay, so for those of you who haven't been paying attention, the NFL wrapped up its regular season a couple weeks ago, and this past weekend was the first slate of games in the Wildcard Round. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with what the playoff system looks like, we will break it down for you right now. In the NFL, the Wildcard Round features the lowest four teams from each division. 6, 5, 3, and 4. And then 1 and 2 sit on the sidelines waiting in the division round for the winners of the wild card round. Then those wild card teams will play the division leaders, who were the leaders during the regular season, usually have the best records out of all those teams. And again, this is broken down into AFC and NFC teams. Excuse me. And we just finished the wild card round, which, again, in my opinion, is the more exciting round. The only other round that I feel is a bit more competitive than the wild card round is the championship round. The division round can really be a toss-up. It can be blowouts or it can be really, really close. And the way that the field is played out this time around, it looks like we might be in store for several blowouts. But a quick recap as to what happened this past weekend. Several teams got into the playoffs on the final week of the regular season. Some teams got into the playoffs weeks ago and have just been sitting on the sidelines, keeping themselves healthy for this long haul to the Super Bowl. One of the first games on the docket was the number 6 seeded Indianapolis Colts taking on the number 3 Houston Texans. If you were a fan of the AFC South this year, then this was a very, very, very intriguing matchup featuring two very good teams. One that's on its way back to stardom, it looks like, and another one that flirts with being good but ultimately falls short of that grand prize every single time. Andrew Luck, quarterback for the Colts, having a comeback year, leading this team from basically the bottom of the division all the way to the top. And the same thing can be said with Houston. Houston kind of struggled at the beginning for the first week or two, but really, really took off, only to kind of sputter towards the end, and that's not what you want. You kind of want to sputter at the beginning, pick up some momentum in the middle, and then finish the regular season strong. But either way, both teams very good. Indianapolis probably a little bit better of the two, simply because of their quarterback situation, and that definitely came into play this past weekend. Let's see. Some of the stats from this particular game. Let's see. Please give me one moment. My information was accidentally deleted. Okay, so here we go. In the first quarter, we saw Indianapolis, actually in the first half, we saw Indianapolis jump out to the lead that they had, and they never ever let up after that. Andrew Luck's first pass to Eric Ebron came at about the 10-minute 32 mark in the first quarter, followed very quickly by another touchdown. This time Marlon Mack rushed for the touchdown, bringing the score 14-0 after the first quarter. In the second quarter, Andrew Luck passed to Dontrell Inman for an 18-yard pass, bringing the score to 21-0, and that's pretty much where the game ends. The only other thing that happened was in the fourth quarter at about the 10:57 mark. Deshaun Watson passed to Kiki Coty for a 6-yard touchdown, but that was all Houston could do. At the end of the day, Andrew Luck had 222 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. His counterpart, Deshaun Watson, fairly close to the same stats, although he threw a hell of a lot more, had 235 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. But this is the big stat, 3 sacks. 3 sacks and 0 for Andrew Luck. You can't win football games when you're getting hit that many times. Even though it's only 3 times, it's 3 too many. And in a league where one play, 1 sack, 1 tip of the ball can alter history, and especially in the playoffs, you really, really got to play your best. T.Y. Hilton was the top man for the Indianapolis Colts, bringing in 85 yards, however, no touchdown. And Kiki Coty was the top man for the Houston Texans with 11 receptions for 110 yards and a touchdown. So a good day receiving for the Houston Texans, but overall a poor team performance, and Indianapolis is able to walk away with the victory. All right, we move to a second game that took place this past weekend, and that was the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers a 5 seed in the playoffs, the Ravens a 4 seed. The reason for that is the Baltimore Ravens won their division outright, so they get one of those coveted 1, 2, 3, 4 spots, where the LA Chargers, despite the fact that they had the better record over Baltimore, Baltimore finishing 10-6, LA finishing 12-4. LA has to play second fiddle to the Kansas City Chiefs, who were the best team in the AFC and I believe the best team in the NFL this year per the regular season. And if not, it was definitely a split with the New Orleans Saints. But anyways, the LA Chargers took on the Baltimore Ravens. An intriguing matchup, to say the least. Phillip Rivers has had a pretty good record against Baltimore, but when it comes to the playoffs, he always seems to stumble just a little bit. But that wasn't the case in this particular game. Both teams came to play. Baltimore definitely looking to play the upset card. It was in Baltimore, and it looked like things were going to go their way. Interesting enough, I saw a video clip earlier in the week of running back Melvin Gordon for the LA Chargers in a cab with the Baltimore Ravens, or in Baltimore, talking to the cabbie about who he thought he was going to win and how good Baltimore was and how much he really respected the running back for the LA Chargers, only to be found out at the end of the ride that the man that he was talking to the whole time was the starting running back for the LA Chargers. A funny story, and if you can catch that clip on YouTube or on Facebook, I would definitely recommend watching it. It's a good couple minutes long, but it's pretty funny nonetheless. Okay, so some of the stats from this particular game. Phillip Rivers had an unusually quiet day. 32 pass attempts, 22 completions, only 160 yards, and no touchdowns. Just very odd for Phillip Rivers. He usually has a 200-yard game with at least a touchdown, but Baltimore really known for their defense, shutting down the passing game at every opportunity, and they showcased it in this particular game. No interceptions, no touchdowns. He was only sacked once, so while the Ravens were able to slow down the Chargers' passing attack, they couldn't absolutely stop it. However, on the other side of the ball, Lamar Jackson had 29 attempts, 14 completions for 194 yards, so about 34 more yards than Phillip Rivers, 2 touchdowns and an interception. But the big stat, again, is sacks. 7 times the LA Chargers were able to put Lamar Jackson on his back. 7 times that offensive line broke down, and Jackson was no longer able to throw the ball to his top receivers. Speaking of rushing and Melvin Gordon, he had a quiet day as well. 17 rushing attempts for only 40 yards, but he had a touchdown. That was the most important part of the offensive strategy for LA. So really, from a statistical point of view, LA did very little offensively, but that's pretty typical when you play the Baltimore Ravens. In retrospect, we look at Baltimore and see that their leading rusher was, again, their quarterback, Lamar Jackson. And when you have Lamar Jackson, he should be one of your top runners on your team. He also had 54 yards rushing, no touchdowns, however. Their running back was, the running game was split between Gus Edwards and Kenneth Dixon, only combining for about 36 yards total. No touchdowns between any of them. So really, this was a game of inches. The top dog for the Baltimore Ravens was Willie Snead Michael Crabtree, 38 yards receiving, but had both the touchdowns. So very important there. However, it doesn't matter what happened, because at the end of the day, the LA Chargers absolutely buried the Baltimore Ravens. Despite a furious fourth quarter comeback, the Ravens fall just short in their bid for another Super Bowl appearance. All right, we switch gears to yet another game from last weekend. This time we stay with the NFC, and we see the number 4, that's this week's upcoming games. We see the number 4 Dallas Cowboys taking on the number 5 Seattle Seahawks. This is a Dallas team that the last time they met Seattle fell short in that infamous Tony Romo fumble with the 3-point kick. He bobbles the snap, tries to throw the ball or run the ball into the end zone, ultimately gets hit, smashing any hopes of a Cowboys Super Bowl run. That was probably the last time they had a serious enough team that I thought that they might have a chance to go to the Super Bowl, but ended up falling short. Was it the fault of Romo? Was it the fault of the snapper? Who knows? But that's been written in Cowboys lore, and everybody was talking about that particular game because of the matchup between Seattle and Dallas. Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott have yet to pick up a victory in the postseason and had a tough order against the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle, the number 5 seed, Dallas, number 4. This was a game that you felt like you were sleepwalking until about the fourth quarter, and then all of a sudden, an explosion of offense. Russell Wilson having a good day, 233 yards for a touchdown, only sacked once. Dak Prescott having equally just as good a day, 226 yards passing with a touchdown and an interception. The running game was really lopsided. For Seattle, they couldn't get anything going. 4 different running backs, Rashad Penny, Chris Carson, Russell Wilson, and Mike Davis, all combined for less than 100 yards, but were able to put at least a touchdown on the board. Flip over to the Dallas running game, and really there's only one man you need to talk about, and that's Ezekiel Elliott. 137 yards on the ground for 1 touchdown. Dak Prescott also had a couple rushing attempts, 6 to be exact, for a total of 29 yards, and also had a very important touchdown as well. Looking at receivers, it looks like J.D. McKissick was the top guy for the Seattle Seahawks. 13 yards, 2 receptions, but had the very important touchdown. Switch over to Dallas, and looks like the top dog for that day was Amari Cooper with 106 yards, no touchdowns. That would go to Michael Gallup, who had 2 receptions for 18 yards, but had that all-important touchdown. Breaking down this game, it was Seattle's game to lose. It really, really was. I felt like they were the top dog in this particular matchup. Dallas just stepped up and did what they had to do and did just enough to secure the win. However, a very tough order for the Dallas Cowboys this upcoming weekend in the division round. And we closed out the Wildcard Round with a matchup between the Philadelphia Eagles and the upstart Chicago Bears. The Bears winning the NFC North outright, basically making everybody else in the NFC North look terrible. The Lions looked bad. Green Bay fell apart internally, and Minnesota paid way too much money to a quarterback to do nothing. The Eagles, on the other hand, even though they're the defending Super Bowl champions, you wouldn't have known it if you watched this season. They struggled all year with the quarterback, with the running game, with getting upset by teams that had no business upsetting them, and having to win out just to make the playoffs. And you know what, folks? They did. They did. And this game is also infamous. I'm sure you've seen all across Facebook the memes, the pictures, the statements about how the kicker missed the field goal in the closing seconds to hit the upright, to hit the bottom crossbar, and have it bounce back into the field of play. However, the NFL changed its ruling on that and officially declared that a Philadelphia Eagle got his hands on the ball to tip the ball in the wrong direction. This was a close game. If you are a fan of defense, you loved this game because that's all you're going to get from Chicago. Philadelphia won 16-15. Check out part 2